Good morning, Baba Mukasa, Willie Ricks. This is your former
Yes, sir.
student, Makaru Fest
Yes,
Bradley.
sir.
How you doing this morning, brother?
Fine, brother Africa. How you doing?
Oh, doing great, doing great. Let's listen to this clip. It's just sort of a way of introduction. Go ahead, brother Amo.
Carmichael was looking for a new way to frame the civil rights struggle. As it turns out, the solution was right in front of him. One of his colleagues, Willie Ricks, was rousing people with the phrase Black Power. And on June 16, 1966, Stokely used these words himself. The effect was electrifying.
It's time we stand up and take over. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. We want black power. We want black power. We want black power. We want black power. Everybody, what do you want? That's what we gonna get.
Okay, that was a clip from the Skip Gates documentary, Black American Still I Rise. In order to understand how the struggle arrived at that point, we would like to have our guest today, the warrior, one of the most consistent warriors in our struggle, certainly one of the most consistent that I've known. Had the pleasure of meeting this brother in 1969 when I was a student at Morehouse. He took me under his wing and was one of the primary factors in my consciousness being where it is today. Baba Mukasa, can you just give us a little bit of your background? We want to work our way up to Black Power, but we know there's a long process before you all arrived at that. Now, I know that you were born in Chattanooga, but I read that I think your parents were from Alabama, had been working on a plantation in Alabama. Can you just tell us a little bit about your early history there in Chattanooga?
No problem. Yeah, my parents was from North Alabama, and I used to go to North Alabama and pick cotton and chop a little cotton. I wasn't very good at it, but I was trying to make them $3 a day. And our people were basically in slavery down there. Had outhouses and getting water out the well and walking a mile to get a bucket of water and all those kinds of things. But my parents moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I grew up in Chattanooga. And at that point, everything was segregated. We had to go in the back door, say you're supposed to say yes to the white people. We lived in the slums. We lived in the worst, probably the worst conditions of all across the South, all across the country, I guess. And that, so we're in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I lived a pretty normal life. And that at some point in Chattanooga, Tennessee, let's go back. The Freedom Riders started. And when the Freedom Riders started, and the sit-in movement kicked off, and when the sit-in movement kicked off, the students began to sit in and go to the white places, bus stations, and sit in the front, try to go in the restaurant where the white people went, go down to the stores in the downtown areas and try to eat and sit where the white people sit, or go to the theaters and stand in front of the theaters and ask to go in where the white people were supposed to go. They had a place in the back upstairs for us to go if we could go in at all. And that those kinds of things existed, and that we lived, they didn't pave our community. The streets were not paved for the most part. They didn't, so we just lived under apartheid system. And we lived under the apartheid system. Students at A&T College started the sit-in movement, and then the movement started spreading around across the South. And when it spread across the South, Fisk, Tennessee State, and Morehouse, Spelman, and other schools all over the South began to go and sit in and stand in and demonstrate. So a national movement was basically spontaneously kicked off basically like you see maybe the Black Lives Matter and what have you. And when this group kicked off, a lady named Ella Baker decided, and Dr. King, Martin King, decided to pull these people together. And when they decided to pull these people together, they pulled together the college parts of the students and brought the students into Raleigh, North Carolina at Shaw University, where Dr. King wanted this group to be a youth group for his organization, the SCLC. Now, going back a little bit, I remember Rosa Parks at the point when we had to ride on the back of the buses and what have you. Rosa Parks went and sit down on the front of the bus. And when she sit on the front of the bus, that kicked off a movement in Montgomery.
Okay, yeah,
And
that's
organization.
yeah. What I want, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, Baba Mukasa, before we got up to SNCC was in terms of the things that were taking place, affecting our people in the United States while you were growing up, such as the lynching of Emmett Till. You just mentioned the Montgomery bus boycott. Both Till was, of course, was lynched in August of 1955, and the bus boycott started in December of 1955, and then, of course, you had the attempt to desegregate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. How aware were you of those things that was taking place? Was there, and was there any activities at all at this time in Chattanooga?
I wasn't conscious of a lot of things at that time. Everybody was impacted by the Africans trying to go to school in Little Rock because that was just a thing that African people were looking at, and it was very startling to see our children trying to go to a school with white people and seeing white people spitting at them and calling them nigger and trying to hurt them or kill them, to the point that they had to bring National Guards in to protect these kids from the violence that their mamas and daddies and the school teachers and the community was trying to do to these little 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 16-year-old kids for going into a white school. So that sort of impact everybody. And of course, Emmett Till's murder and lynching Emmett Till, we were all told always not to, say yes to the white people, not to intimidate white people, not to, disobey the white people because they would kill you, lynch you, and you not to look at a white woman, not to talk to white people and a white girl and what have you, because they would kill you for it. So when we saw them kill, murder, lynch Emmett Till, and then saw the picture of Emmett Till's face, that impacted all of us also. As a matter of fact, that left us in a major shock just to see a brother's face, a kid's face, 9, 10 years old, however he was, face, nose tore off, eyes tore out his head, face completely chopped up just like savages and beasts had got a hold to him, worse than what a wolf could have did to him. And that just to see that was the impact. And then when you had Rosa Parks sit down on the front of the bus and then had a movement to get organized where they called a meeting in Dr. King's church after Rosa Parks sit down on the bus. Martin Luther King was a 29-year-old preacher that was new in town. When they called a meeting in his church, and when they called a meeting in Dr. King's church, Mr. Say and E.J. Nixon and those called, and they did it in the name of the Montgomery Improvement Association. And they called a meeting in Dr. King's church at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and they said, we got to continue this movement. We got to continue the work what Ms. Parks have done, and we're going to keep the movement going. So Dr. King said, well, good, and thank you, and I have another meeting to go to, and they said, you can't go, Dr. King. We're going to make you the leader of this movement. And Dr. King was drafted to be the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association, basically because he was new in town and white folks didn't have nothing on him, and that he could freely speak for that movement without worrying about white folks putting up some debt, some bills, making it hard for him. So he became the spokesman for the movement. And when he became the spokesman for the movement, of course, they blew his house up. They tried to kill him on many occasions. They used violence against him. But he was inspired and inspired all black people in the world that saw that. They saw a young warrior hero standing up against the most vicious white racist system that somebody could stand up against. So Dr. King slowly became a hero among our people. So that was the Montgomery Improvement Association, and that affected us somewhat in Chattanooga in different kinds of ways. Now, I remember one time, probably years after that, or during that movement, I don't know exactly what time, but probably in the 60s somewhere, I got on a bus and sit on the front of the bus, and that it was, I think it might have been, it was still segregation, and I sit on the front of the bus, and a white man, I remember an old white man telling me to go back to the back of the bus. Boy, get to the back of the bus, and I didn't say nothing to him. I just pulled out my hook bill knife and just put it in my lap and looked at it. And I think that was the end of that. He's lucky that he didn't try to push it no further, because I might not be here today to talk to you, but I did pull my hook blade out. So the impact was there.
Okay. So now, as you stated earlier, in February of 1960, Brother McCain, McNeil, and the other brothers over at North Carolina A&T staged the first what they call sit-in at the Woolworths. And then in April of that year, after the sit-in spread, as you noted, to Diane Nash and John Lewis, Marion Barry, and all of those the students in Nashville, the sit-ins more or less spread around the South, and that led to this conference in April of 1960 at Shaw University, where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was formed based on the advice of Ella Baker. So you can pick up the story from there. How did so this is in April of 1960, and at what point did you become involved with SNCC, Barbara Mukasa?
All right. Well, at that point we had battles all over the South. In Albany, Georgia, they had walked off to school at Albany State and went down to the white bus station. They created a movement. In Nashville, you had the same movement, but this movement spread it like wildfire. And I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we did the same thing. And when we were doing the same thing in Chattanooga, Tennessee, marching and even going to jail, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, this probably during the same time, 60, 61, we didn't have nobody to direct us properly, I guess, and so we had never heard of nonviolence. So when we marched downtown on one occasion, white people came in, or white boys, and white folks came in, and they started hitting us and fighting us, and we started fighting back, and we fought back. We were near the main street called 9th Street. That was the hood street, Black Folk Street, and we fought and went out the back door of the place, but a mob attacked us, and when we got to 9th Street, they were following us, and that's when we started throwing bricks and balls and banging them and whatever, and we fought back. And I was proud to say that Chattanooga was one of the first, the first students to go up in rebellion, to riot, throw bricks and balls, and bust white folks in the head. And I was in those groups.
Okay.
And we bust them in the head, beat them, fought them, and the best we could. And then on the next day, we turned out all the schools. And I was a student, acting as a student at Howard High School. My sister and twin sister and all of them, they were involved in it. And so the next day after we were mobbed, we turned the whole school out, went downtown, broke the windows out, and bust white folks up beside the head, broke out. We just did everything. And we just had a major fight. Threw bricks and balls at the police, bust them upside the head. And Dr. King and the NAACP people, they rushed to Chattanooga. And when they rushed to Chattanooga, they rushed there to teach us about nonviolence. And that I remember when they called a meeting in the church with the students and said, we want y'all to be nonviolent. We don't want you to fight back. We want you to, if they spit on you, allow them to spit on you. If they kick you, hit you, slap you, allow them to do that. And the guy demonstrated about if somebody slap you, he got a couple of people up and he slapped them and say, will you slap back? And I was sitting there looking at him. I thought he was crazy. I said, well, let me slap you. And brother, I got up there and I slapped that brother so hard. And from that point on, I joined and used the nonviolent tactic and went across the South being nonviolent.
Okay. So you left Chattanooga and went to Atlanta. Well, that's where the headquarters of SNCC.
Yeah. Well, after rebellion in Chattanooga, and after we fought, shortly after, and Dr. King and C.T. Vivian knows, C.T. was there with us, matter of fact, and then Dr. King and them came and they said that an organization was being formed and that youth was coming together, and they told me about it, and they told Ruby Doris them about me and my activity in Chattanooga, and that Ruby Doris called me and told me to come on to Atlanta, and I came there as a SNCC person about 1961, 62.
Okay, let me just. A lot of people in the audience probably won't know who you're talking about. You're talking about Ruby Doris Smith, who was a student at Spelman, and many people may know
George Snick.
George Snick, and some people may know her by her married name, Ruby Doris Robinson. She was part of the Jail No Bail campaign and other things. One of the most dynamic sisters that the Africans in America have ever produced. That people don't know about Ruby Doris. So Ruby Doris called you and you went to Atlanta. Go ahead.
Asked me to come to Atlanta. They told me I was too militant and too militant to be a part of Martin King's organization, SCLC. So they called SNCC and Ruby Doris called me, told me to come, and I became part of the group that was just being formed called SNCC. It was called the SNCC because it was made up of, it was called Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It was students. They were going to use nonviolent tactics. They were going to coordinate what they do, and there was a committee, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And we formed in North Carolina, and under the influence of Dr. King and Ella Baker, but Dr. King Martin wanted us to be part of his youth group, and Ella Baker advised us against that and said, y'all students need your own autonomy, as she used that word, and you need your own organization. And we formed our own organization and became known as SNCC. And we decided that we would not, the difference is we would be an organizing group. We would not be leaders like the SCLC and the preachers was trying to do. They would go somewhere and they were great mobilizers, and Dr. King was great, one of probably the greatest mobilizers in the world that we've known. He could mobilize people, and the preachers, all the preachers around were great mobilizers and orators, and they could speak, and they were ministers. and that SNCC said they would be organizers, and we would go places, and we would, everywhere we would go, we would not go as leaders, but we would go as organizers, and everywhere we go, we would create organization, and then create local leadership.
Right.
For an example, SNCC sent all its workers, we got us an office here in Atlanta, and then we sent all our workers in SNCC to different areas in the South. And everybody had to form an organization. When we went to Albany, Georgia, we formed the Albany Movement. And we went to and brought the leaders, the local people together, formed the organization, gave the leadership to the local people. They became the chairman, the president, the secretary, and all the different offices that the Albany Movement had was made of the local people in Albany, Georgia. And then SNCC served as an advisor.
Okay,
at the same time, yeah.
Let me just stop it right there. Just to clarify something for the audience, so that they can just get a picture of this. When you say SNCC sent organizers out to local communities, this was usually just one person, right? Going to Americus, Georgia, or going to Macomb, Mississippi, or going to Gaston, Alabama, wherever you were going, and you
sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three.
Okay, and so you all would go into these communities, but based on the teachings of Ella Baker, the purpose was to develop grassroots organizations in these communities, right?
Absolutely, and grassroots leadership.
Okay.
And we organized the elder group, like the Albany Movement was made up of the elder people, and at the same time we would organize a youth group. And in Albany, we had a college group of students, Bernice Reagan and William Porter and others. Her name was Bernice Johnson before she married Cordell Reagan. But and other students out of that marched from Albany State, and they got put in jail. And they got put in jail, and many kids that marched from these black schools, African schools, when they would march and go to jail, the white people had so much power over the school that the black school presidents would expel them from school. And when they were expelled from school, they were very, very courageous, because many of them say, now I'm expelled from school, now I'll be a full-time freedom fighter. And that's basically how SNCC got its staff, from students that was expelled from school.
Right. And so, but the point I was making, whether it was 1, 2, or 3, basically you were going to a community, and you basically had to try to meet people, organize people in these communities. You weren't going to Chattanooga, you were going to Americus, you were going to Albany, or you were going to wherever, and you had to basically convince people that you were there to try to improve the conditions, and the people in the communities would basically have to take you all in, because I know you were SNCC was operating on a shoestring budget with very little money to support you. So, I mean, this is real organizing that has to take place at the grassroots level, right?
Oh, yeah, we stepped on the floors of people on the couch, or wherever they had for us to sleep. They shared food with us, fed us, and what have you. And that, we would create that youth movement. We've got the college groups, and now we turn out to high schools and go to junior high schools and create youth movement from there, and start having mass meetings in different places under trees and what have you. And we would talk to them, teach them freedom songs. They ain't scared of nobody, 'cause I want my freedom, old freedom. I know freedom is coming. I know freedom is coming, and it will be here before long. And we use that to educate people and to talk about the problems and that we face. But we had to take the fear out of people And we would say, I ain't scared of no white people because I want my freedom. And we know they put dogs on us sometime. We ain't scared of your dogs because we want our freedom. They beat us in the head with sticks. We ain't scared of your sticks because I want my freedom. And you know they threw dynamite at us on many occasions. And we was even saying, I ain't scared of your dynamite because I want my freedom. So we knew that we would face violence and bombs and even death, young people, children. And that we had to figure out ways of taking the fear out of them. And we created what we call freedom schools, where we would just be out there talking under trees and in the basement of a church if the church would open the door and let us in. But many of the churches were scared to death, and they would lock us out and basically cooperate with the white police and the mayor and whoever the white folks were. So we didn't have many places to meet, but there were a few churches that would open the door and let us in.
Right. I think Gullah Jack had a question he wanted to ask you.
Gullah Jack here, Brother Ricks.
Yes.
I heard. Yes, sir. Mukasa. I heard Brother Teray, a.k.a. Stokely Carmichael, talk about some of the components and principles of organization. One of the key things he mentioned was that, first and foremost, an organization needs an ideology. Could you tell us all that you know regarding what constitutes an organization? What are some of those component principles? Take it wherever you want to take it.
Well, organization, you got to have people, and you got to have people that's committed to an idea and separate themselves from the opposing ideas. So we would find people that wanted freedom, liberation, and was willing to fight for it. We come together and we work toward those ideas. And that was how these organizations made up of people that believed in those ideas. And by doing that and by the practice and the fighting and the demonstrating and the protests and all that, you form fighters and you form thinkers, because you had to, once you do things, once you demonstrate, once you protest, once you fight, then you talk about it and you start developing thoughts and ideals and developing ideologies about what you're doing. And basically, the real thinkers were and the real intellectual was those people that was demonstrating, protesting, fighting. Because when they explained what they have done and what was going on and what they saw and what they experienced, they were the real intellectuals, not somebody that was sitting back reading a book or some professor somewhere, but the one who was actually doing it. They were the ones that was explaining it better and anybody was more clear. For an example, SNCC had a lot of college students, and we also had groups what we call local people. And we would organize local people, and the local people would just be the grassroots people of the communities and what have you, and they would be of all ages. As a matter of fact, Fannie Lou Hamer was a local person, and Ella Baker was a educated person, a very knowledgeable person, very good person, and a freedom fighter. And Ella Baker was a very dynamic speaker and people that could present the freedom cause to people very clearly. But then Miss Hamer was a plantation owner. I mean, not an owner, but a victim, a worker, a slave on the plantation. And when Miss Baker tell what went on and what was going on, she described it greatly, and it was very clear. But when Miss Hamer described it, it was like if you see somebody burning on fire, and you just stand there watching them burn, and maybe a little piece of fire get on you a little bit, but you see them burn and you describing them burning and the pain they in, you give a great description. It'll hurt you to even tell it, but the person that's burning and the person that's on fire, when they describe the fire that's on them and they're burning and the hell and how it feels and what they're going through, then it's different. So Miss Heyman, when she gave a description of slavery and freedom and what we were going through and the hell we were catching, her description was even greater than that of Ella Baker or Jim Foreman or me or anybody else, because she was catching that hell and she lived in that hell. She was on that plantation. So we began to bring these kind of people out and give them a voice and unite with them. So organization is made up of people that's willing to carry that fight forward and fight for the things that we believe in, that we think that we need in order to liberate our people. So organization is the weapon.
Last question for this segment. How do you suborn egos to the greatness of the cause? How did you mail those egos, Brother Mukasa?
Say it again?
How were you able to mail those egos, or to get those egos?
Ego?
Yes, sir. To submerge those egos to the greatness of the cause.
What do you mean? Say it, break it down.
Well, you got individualism in organizations, and a lot of times individuals have their own agenda. How did you get those individuals who have their own agenda to push their ego aside for the greatness of the cause? That's a problem we deal with. We've always dealt with in given our oppression, sir.
Yeah, well, sometimes the ego may be there, but our egos out there on how you gonna fight, demonstrate, protest, how you gonna face dogs, bombs, guns, how you gonna go knock on doors and talk to people and go into the fields and walk them cotton fields and go out there and talk to people and convince them to be freedom fighters and strugglers and talk to them and listen to them and go to their meetings and go to and help develop people into being able to express themselves, not to be afraid to go and face dogs, bombs, guns, and those kinds of things, and that's where you spend your energy doing. And so your ego was to serve and fight and create freedom fighters and stand up against the enemies of Africa and the enemies of the revolution and the enemies of the movement. So that little ego about somebody, whatever, it wasn't important. And that matter of fact, a lot of times those kind of egos just come from people that's sitting around talking and ain't doing nothing, and they are more concerned about I and self instead of being concerned about the people and the hell people catching. And once you become aware and look at the world and see the suffering and the pain that your people are in, and the suffering and pain that your organization and movement is trying to get them out of, or see what you're fighting against, then I think your own little ego would be just go away, because it is not about not about yourself, but it's about your people. Your people are dying. Your people are suffering. And this is what we have to change, and this is what we're going up against. We're going up against a major monster in the world that's eating and destroying our people.
Exactly, and I think the point there is that activism, when you're in the front lines of a struggle, versus sitting around on YouTube or wherever. I mean, it's just a totally different aspect. But let me ask you this, Baba Mukasa, as we move through this past this through the civil rights period, can you explain the mindset of the activists that were confronting apartheid? Because what we have today, obviously there are a number of our people who never actually lived under apartheid, under the system of total control, where your life had actually zero value. People could just they had total domination over you. They determined where you live, whatever you did, where you ate, whatever. Could you explain the mindset? Because there was the struggle against apartheid, which a lot of people saw as something that would lead to integration, whereas others were simply trying to break down the system to move beyond that. But a lot of people saw that phase of the struggle as something that had a negative effect in terms of the, whatever little economics or the things that we might have had in the community at that time. Can you just explain the mindset of the people that were involved in the struggle as concerning apartheid, desegregation, integration, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, I don't know if I'm. You say apartheid. You talking about segregation?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I'm talking about Jim Crow segregation.
Oh, well, all of them mean the same thing. Now, I just give you my opinion. I'm not good at knowing the mindset of so many people. I could definitely tell you maybe my mindset. I don't know the mindset of the others. I'm not good at those kind of interpretations, but I do my best to try to answer your question. We was catching hell, and that we was out fighting, and you had no choice but to fight for your liberation. And you living under a system where you go in the back doors and you live under worse conditions like we doing now. Many of us don't have water. Many, even today, didn't have a bathroom, a toilet. You lived in an outhouse or whatever. Would go to the worst schools, what have you, and to get your books after white folks get through reading them. You got roaches, rats in your house, and you just live under those conditions. You work, and you don't make the same amount of money that the Europeans work like today. White folks make more money than you do, and they got finer houses and more of this and what have you. So once you see all that, then it's just there. And that there are those who come to the conscious and say, we're going to fight against this, we're going to join the movement, we're going to join the organization, and we're going to speak out against it. Now, we are in the same conditions that we were 40, 50, or 100 years ago. 50 years ago, we had, a little more than 50 years ago probably, we had 50 million acres of land. All of that's gone. We had, in every neighborhood was segregated, apartheid as you called it. We had our own business. We had clothing stores. We had for ourselves, because we couldn't go to the white man stuff. We had restaurants. We had there were movie theaters that we were running or had what have you. And we had our own basically everything, even in our community. We were like a nation within a nation, and that we had leaders that traveled and went around the world, churches that traveled to Africa and set up relationships with different governments and countries and people. We had leaders that traveled abroad around the world, like Paul Robeson and the Garvey movement and people of that statues around the world. And we had our own ambassadors and our own relationships. And the white people in the segregation, we were separated from the white man. And that today, under integration, they have taken everything that we ever had, all our businesses. They have jailed all our men. They are drugging our children. We are jobless. The prison and jail system is packed with us, and they're making money off the slave system of prisons and what have you. And that our conditions have went down. And now, again, I don't speak in terms of our people in the United States, because this is a small minority of Africans that were brought to the United States from Africa. I think we made 30 million even after populating. We made 30 million people. But then you got 100 million Africans in Brazil. You got 500 million Africans in the Caribbean. And then you got, I guess, 500-600 million Africans on the continent of Africa, if not more. And so when I speak, I'm speaking of African people worldwide and not just the small population of us in the United States, because we are being butchered and killed and starved and robbed, not just in the United States, but also in Colombia, South America, where they're killing our people every day, war. Also in the South Pacific, where African people live, the coconut revolution, y'all should Google that, look it up. Also in Guinea-Bissau, where Mukasa brought in, the people are fighting for their lives and fighting for their survival right now. The continent of Africa is being raped by Europe and the United States, and all the industries and factories in the world got ships and trucks rolling down the street, stealing the natural resources out of Africa. They got mines and whatever. And so we live under this apartheid, and it's all over the world, matter of fact. And everybody that disagree with the rape and rob and murder of African people, they dropping bombs on them all over the world. So the United States, like Dr. King say, is the greatest terrorist nation in the world. And this is what this sit-in movement, this is what us trying to get a hamburger led us to see a larger picture.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I mean, okay. So we want to deal more with that in just a minute. But let's go through briefly. You know, if you want to talk about the period between the Birmingham movement, the March on Washington, the Freedom Summer. I don't know. Is that background? You got some background noise going on, Baba?
I'm moving.
Okay.
I'm moving to another position. Go ahead.
Okay. Birmingham, the March on Washington, Freedom Summer. Of course, with the killings of James Earl Chaney, Mickey Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. Of course, you also had the assassination of Medgar Evers, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and then Selma. So, could you just go through, say, that period between 1963 and 1965, and then we'll move on to Lowndes County and the Black Power March?
No problem. In 1963, you had the Albany movement that was in full flame. You had where they were 62, 63 in Albany, Georgia, Nixon, people in Albany, Georgia, Charles Sherrod, and others went to Albany, Georgia. When they went to Albany, Georgia, they created the Albany movement. But when the Albany movement was not just in Albany, Georgia, it stretched out to the other areas in Georgia, Lee County, where they began to have try to register people to vote because it was a rural area, and they tried to register people to vote. And when they went to Lee County, Georgia, they had mass meetings in the churches and what have you. They came by and they machine gunned Mr. Agnew James' house, putting machine gun bullets in a house full of 12 children. Bullets went in the children's pillow. But lucky they didn't hit the children. They burnt down the church where we met in out there on the Lee County Highway. They burnt the church down. Matter of fact, Jack Robinson came down and helped give national attention to what was going on with the bombing of the church. They bombed another church out there in Sassa, Georgia. Miss Carolyn Daniel in Dawson, Georgia. They used to machine gun her house every weekend because we tried to register people to vote. The Democrats was doing this. They threw dynamite on her porch all the time, blew the house up where we were living, and they just kept on blowing it up. We had to live in the back of the house because the front of the house was blown up. So that's the kind of thing we live in whenever we try to protest. In Americus, Georgia, we had a demonstration there on August 8, 1968. Children marched downtown in a night march, and when they marched downtown, the police, the sheriff, the firemen, and other whites came and started posses, and they beat kids with baseball bats. They beat them with broke arms, legs, ribs, and threw them out in an old abandoned prison. Little high school girls, junior high school children, threw them out in an abandoned prison. And then they charged us for insurrection, which was death penalty. They had SNCC people sitting on death row, on facing the death penalty for just civil rights demonstration, and those kinds of attacks. So we faced the greatest violence that you could ever want to see. In Moultrie, Georgia, I went into a courthouse and the police station and drank some white water after we were having demonstrations there, and they had children in jail and what have you. And I went into the courthouse and drank out of a white water fountain. And about 8 police, they beat me up in there, beat me, knocked my teeth out, and I sit on death row for a month in Moultrie, Georgia, and those kinds of things. And then at the same time, you had Birmingham going, where you had Selma. And in Selma, they were beating us and using all kinds of terrorism against us, trying to kill us. And every day we were fleeing and trying to move around and to save our lives, to stop being shot, beaten, or whatever. But we had to go from house to house and talk to people about freedom, talk to people about the slavery, talk to people about the condition we were in, talk to people about what white people were doing to us and how they had no right to do that, and how they didn't have a right to hold us in slavery, how we had a right to have, pavement on our streets, to be called Miss, not to have to go in back doors. We had a right to be able to make as much money, work on the same kind of job a white man work on. We had a right to make the equal amount of money that they make. We had a right to go to court and be able to not just be found guilty because we were Africans, because we were black. We would be able to go up against a white man in court. You automatically was guilty because a white man say you was guilty, and you would get another charge if you said a white man did it to you. So all kinds of racism that we faced. They were killing us. I remember in Americus, Georgia, when they raped a little 12-year-old girl. Her name was Anna B. Hayes. Y'all can look her name up on the computer. Anna B. Hayes, they raped her, and then came back and kept her that whole day raping her, and brought her back and dumped her in her yard. And the word got out that white men raped her. The sheriff went out there, Sheriff Chapel went to the house, and the little boy who said they raped her, the sheriff slapped him, made him get on his knees and say he didn't see a white man do nothing. And 2 days later, the little girl died. Her name was Anna B. Hayes.
Where was this?
And when nothing other than Americus, Georgia, 1963. And when nothing done about it. And that's one of the reasons I went to Americus, Georgia. I said I was going to go there and help find the white man that did this to men that did this to these little girls and kill them. And we went there looking for them, but we tore that town up. Look up, as a matter of fact, y'all Google the Sumter County movement, and you'll see demonstrations, protests, and how even we tore it up so bad that Dick Gregory, even Martin King, Hosea Williams, all of them ended up coming to that town. And one day when we were marching, a white man jumped out there with a gun. And when he jumped out there with a gun, a brother shot him in the right between the eyes and killed him. And I didn't have no problem with that. I thought that was a good thing. So we faced those kinds of things. And then in Birmingham, when we was in Birmingham, they bombed the church, killed little children. And when they bombed the church, the same day they shot down 2 other little young boys, 12, 13 years old children. And that they were bombers. I was in the hotel when they bombed the hotel, the Gaston Motel, where Dr. King and all of us were staying. They bombed that and what have you. And I was also there when a mob of white people invaded the hotel where we were staying, and we had to come out. Everybody had to come out fighting. Even Dr. King was out there swinging, trying to get these white folks out of there, away from us. He had to fight. Everybody had to fight. And then after we got through fighting, and after we drove them back, we went back to being nonviolent. At that point, you didn't have time to be nonviolent. And you got racist crackers trying to hit you in the head, kill you, beat you, bomb you, and what have you. Then you have no choice but to defend yourself. And even Dr. King, if you go back to Montgomery, Alabama, when they bombed Dr. King's house, he was a nonviolent man. But when they bombed his house and almost killed this little girl and his wife, the first thing Dr. King did went to the pawn shop and bought him a pistol.
Right. Okay, so we got Birmingham followed by the march on Washington, and then you got Freedom Summer.
Well, Birmingham came after the March on Washington. Came before Birmingham. After we got back from the March on Washington, that's when they bombed the church in Birmingham.
Right.
But at the same time, we had Freedom Summer that started in '64, but the movement had started organizing down there early at '61. And by the time we got to '64, that was the combination of a lot of organizing, going from house to house, setting up freedom schools, having hundreds of mass meetings, going from house to house, sitting down, talking to people like Fannie Lou Hamer. That's just to name one. When I said Fannie Lou Hamer, there were 1,000 or 100 women just as smart, just as courageous, just as strong as Fannie Lou Hamer, just as determined to be free. And they spoke and fought just like Miss Hamer did. So we just used Miss Hamer as a one-person symbol. But when you talk about Miss Hamer, you talk about hundreds of other people, whether it's June Johnson or Miss Devine or Miss Gray or many others. And these women stretched not just in Birmingham, not just in Dawson, Georgia. Carolyn Daniels, that woman down there in Dawson, Georgia, they threw dynamite on her house every day. And she said, "Snick folk, y'all come stay here, organize from here and whatever." And she showed no sign of fear. Machine gun the house over and over again. They machine gun Agnew James' house. They bombed churches. And the people in them churches, they didn't turn on us. They stood with us all the way. And even some of them people, when the white men ran at us and come to kill us, and mobs came and got around the house, these people come out with their shotguns and say, "If you come on our land and try to touch these sneak boys, we're going to kill you. We'll fight."
Right.
And these people that stood up. And
right.
So when we went into Mississippi, we found black people in slavery, no schools, bad schools, bad conditions, sharecropping, and segregation, just the worst conditions that human beings could live under. And we've been living under those conditions since we came here from Africa as slaves. And that we went there and started fighting against them. They burnt down 75 churches in the summer of '64. They killed Cheney, Swanee, Goodman. They had murdered, Herbert Lee, and they murdered Mr. Damon. A group came to their house, and when they came to Mr. Damon's house, a Klan group, white folk, came and started shooting at his house. Mr. Damon started shooting back outside, and he put his children and family out the back door. And when he put his family out the back door, they threw bombs in his house and burned him up in his house. And this is Mr. Damon in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Right.
Metcalf down in Natchez, Mississippi. And Worthy Jackson, my wife's kin people in Natchez, Mississippi. They put a bomb in Worthy Jackson's car and blew him up. He worked at the tire company down there, and they killed him. So, but they were killing, lynching, and hanging and beating African people on a daily basis. And if you forget to say yes, sir, I remember I went in the store in America, Georgia. The white man asked me, he said, "You want some more?" I went in the store, I got some bread. He said, "You want anything else?" I said, "No." He said, "Did you say no?" I said, "No." I said, "Yeah, no." I wasn't thinking what he was saying. He snicked me and hit me with a pair of brass knuckles and scattered my jaw. I'm a white man, nigga. And then when he kicked me, it dazed me. I was a little 18-year-old girl named Sophia. Sophia grabbed me and she pushed me out the back door. I was dazed. She pushed me out the back door, but before I could get out the back door, the cracker ran from behind there and kicked me in the back. Anyway, she pushed me out the stove. And then I went to the house and called the ambulance, black ambulance, and said, I'm going to the hospital because it hurt my back. I went to the hospital after cracker kicked me. I went to the hospital. They took me in the emergency room. When I got in the emergency room, about six white men were standing around the bed, including the white man that kicked me. And the doctor said, what's wrong with you, nigga? And I said, they kicked me in the back. And he grabbed my leg and slammed it down on the bed. Said, ain't nothing wrong with you, nigga. And the white guy who kicked me was standing there right with him. And I looked at all the white folks. I jumped out of that bed and said, damn sure ain't got the hell out of there. And then,
well, you know, the thing that
went down to the Justice Department, and there was a white man, the justice of the peace, who take the warrants out. His name was Southwell. Southwell used to ride through the black neighborhood and at night and see a brother walking down the street and said, come here, boy. And he was justice of the peace. Police. He just, come here. Stick your head in this water. Have a gun in his hand. You stick your head in the water. He rolls the one up on your neck. And when he rolls the one up on your neck, he cock his gun and take his blackjack out. The kind that used to bounce. And he draw it back and he cock his gun and said, nigga, don't you break my window. And he hits you in the head. Boo! And make knots all across your head. And if you try to run, he would shoot you. And this is kind of cracky was. I went to that cracker and tried to take a warrant out. He ended up put me in jail and put an 8-year-old boy in jail. He was in the cell right next to me. And cause we picked at that store and they came and put us in jail and whatever. But I'm just saying the kind of justice that we faced in this country and the kind of justice that we still face. So we went into Mississippi. We tried to fight all that. We organized the organization on a statewide level, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and Aaron Henry and Miss Hamer and Miss Divine and Victoria Gray and many others were part of that. And this was a peasant, cotton picking farmers movement inside of Mississippi that was organized by SNCC, and it got so strong that we even took them to, in 1964, took them to the National Democratic Convention and said that we live in terrorism. They bomb us, they burn down churches, they burn down schools, they assassinate our people and kill us. And we gave examples of Herbert Lee and what have you, and that we give examples how we live in terrorism, and that these elections is illegal. You deny us the right to vote. You use terrorism to keep us from voting, and we demanded that they give us the seats. And the Democratic Party, President Johnson, when Miss Hamer spoke up there, she was speaking so powerful that President Johnson had to bought her time off there and took her off there. He came on there. But they said, we want these seats these white people got. They illegally elected, and the National Democratic Party sided with the racist white power structure, Senator Easton Stennis, and those power with them. And we told the Democratic Party and Miss Hamer and all the pillars of Mississippi told the Democratic Party to go to hell. We're not Democrats. And Malcolm made it even clear, we're not Democrats, we're not Republicans, and we're not Americans. And we went back to Mississippi and said, damn the Democratic Party. And shortly after then, we went there. They beat us in Selma, beat Martin King on the bridge where they forced him to turn around. And matter of fact, SNCC forced Martin Luther King to march that day when they turned around in Selma on Turnaround Tuesday. The United States government issued an injunction against Martin King, telling him he couldn't march, and telling the whole 1,000 people they couldn't march after they ran horses over, beat us. We wanted to march where we could go out there and confront them crackers with horses, dogs, bombs, or whatever they had. We was ready to die and go face them in the streets. And Martin King said, no, we won't march. But Slick put me up against Martin King. Martin was in the church speaking. I was outside the church, standing on the steps, talking to about 1,000 or 5,000 people. I don't know how many it was, but it was plenty of people outside. And Martin had plenty of people inside, and we had the people screaming outside, "March, march, march!" to force the hand of Dr. King and all those so-called SCLC and local people, whatever, that was taking their position. And we sneak forced them to march, and we marched across the bridge. We forced them to march across the bridge. And they made a deal with the State Department, with the governor of Alabama, and the Justice Department, that they would march so far across the bridge and turn around, and SNCC didn't know that. And when Dr. King marched across the bridge, they marched across, and then after Dr. King said, "Sir, will you let us march across the bridge? We're on our way to Montgomery." And Al Lingo and Sheriff say, "No, you can't march. This march is illegal. Turn around." And Dr. King said, "Just give us a moment to pray." And they prayed, and when they got up, Martin King ordered people to turn around. And when he ordered people to turn around, we started calling him a traitor, or Uncle Tom, and said, "SCLC, y'all ain't nothing but a bunch of goddamn Uncle Toms, and you're too weak." And Foreman and myself and SNCC people, we went to Montgomery. We went and took over Alabama State. We went to Tuskegee and mobilized the students at Tuskegee Institute, brought them up to Montgomery, took over Martin Luther King's old church, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and his church was less than a block from the Capitol, and we used that church to mount demonstrations at George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, and we used that to start doing that. SCLC, they left Selma, so y'all getting more attention than Selma getting. They left Selma and came to Montgomery and joined the police department. I'm talking about Andrew Young, James Bevel, and even Martin them came there and tried to calm the march down, try to march with us. And we took marched thousands of people in the streets, and they wanted to call an end to the march. That's when Foreman got up on at the church and at Bethel Church and told the people, "If we can't sit at the table of justice, we'll kick the fucking legs off." This Jim Foreman. Jim Foreman was the foremost, strongest leader inside the civil rights movement, stronger than Martin King, stronger than Stokely, a million times stronger than John Lewis, stronger than Rap Brown. Jim Foreman directed SNCC and directed the whole civil rights movement, and even made Martin King a stronger, better man, and challenged Dr. King in every way, and put me up on the stage next to King, and I had to speak with him, out-preach him, and take different positions and hold the position in SNCC. So anyway, after all these different seeing all this violence and what have you inside of Selma, Martin Luther King turned around on that bridge. When Dr. King turned around on that bridge, we went into Montgomery, and we made it clear that we didn't want nothing to do with the march, but also now people go back down there to that bridge and they march across the bridge every year. Some of them be carrying American flags and saying these little songs and whatever, marching across the bridge. But when I was down there and I spoke, I told people that that's the bridge where they beat us. They beat SNCC people. They beat John Lewis. They beat Bob Mans. They beat Hosea. They beat the SNCC and SCLC people. They beat the people of Selma on this bridge. This is the bridge where they forced Dr. King to turn around, bag up, and do something he had never done before, but turn around and made him back up off that bridge. And this is the bridge where they made Dr. King almost sell us out on the bridge that day. And this bridge needs to be blown up, needs to be burnt down. It ain't no bridge we need to go across, singing songs and carrying American flag, because we had a great victory. Because we didn't have no victory. We were beaten down on the bridge, and the shit need to be burnt down.
Okay. All right. So now we're gonna run out of time before we get to a lot of this stuff. But what I got out of everything that you said there was there was just an indomitable spirit and courage amongst the grassroots of our people. The
always have been
the young warriors in SNCC, and plus the grassroots people,
local people. They're the real
the
warriors.
the local, the Annie Devines, Victoria Gray, as you say, June Johnson, Annie Lee Cooper, who knocked out Jim Clark, and Ms. Amelia Boynton Robinson, and those yeah. So you all went into Lowndes County, and we know
right during that same time at night after they got to Montgomery, Martin marched to Montgomery, sent troops down there. SNCC refused to participate in it for the most part, and they marched to Montgomery. And when they the night they marched to Montgomery, Martin made his speech in Montgomery. I was right there sitting on stage right there, and they made their speech in Montgomery on that night when they started taking the marchers back home. The FBI and the Ku Klux Klan was riding together, and they shot and killed Viola Luzo and Jim Jones was riding in a car, and they pulled up beside and they started shooting in the car, and they shot Viola Luzo in the head, and Jimmy Jones stayed dead, and he ended up getting away and telling the story. And then during that time, they beat to death Jonathan Daniels down in
Lowndes County.
Mr. Reed, Reverend Reed, they beat Jonathan Daniels in Lowndes County later on, but they beat Mr. Reed in Montgomery, in Selma.
Right.
They beat 2 people to death.
Right.
And then SNCC decided, after Viola Luzo, we decided to go into Lowndes County. And we went into Lowndes County, and it was just like South Africa, same statistics, 90% African, and they couldn't register to vote, had no rights, still slave. White folk were taking all the land that they once possessed and all that, and they were being brutalized, killed, murdered, living under apartheid. And we went there and went up against that system, and we tried to register people to vote. They put them off the plantation. When they live, we built tents where they could live in. They come down and shoot in the tents and whatever. We got guns, carbine M1 rifles, and gave all the people got their right to come. And when they would come shoot at us, we would shoot back. And we started a party called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, with a symbol of the Black Panthers. We became known as the Black Panthers. And then they saw us down there with guns. We were looking like, Robert Williams up in North Carolina and whatever. Yeah. And shortly after, we helped organize Deacon for Defense and what have you. But we were known for having guns down south, and we did that. The people up north came and second, they formed chapters of it, and that's how Hugh Newton, Bobby Seals, and all of them became Black Panthers, because SNCC helped them. And it was another organization where SNCC bring in the young people. This time brought in street kids from Oakland, showed them how to get organized, helped them use our office, and showed them organization, printed up leaflets for them, printed up materials for them, showed them how to put meetings together, and helped them form the Black Panthers for Self-Defense. And then we sent them out in the community to organize. We put Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, and Jim Former's name on the organization as honorary members, but they were always SNCC people, but they were honorary members of the Black Panther Party, and we put their names on the Black Panther Party. That gave it international attention, because SNCC had international recognition. And at the same time, when Detroit, after Lowndes County, we went to Mississippi. Shortly after then, we said that we had an election, and we said that John Lewis was too weak and too weak of a man to be the leader of an organization like SNCC. And we fired John Lewis, and we brought Stokely Carmichael in and made him the chairman. And when Stokely became chairman, we just leaving Lowndes County. We now have the Black Panther and that group inside the civil rights movement with guns, and not only with guns, has used them, shot some white people trying to shoot us. And we were shooting back when they would come to shoot at us. We were shooting back, and we were proud to shoot back. And then shortly after then, we had election and Snick and fired John Lewis for being weak and told him he needed to be with somebody like King then, but he couldn't be with us. And then shortly after then, James married today. We forced him.
Bob. Yeah, but before you get to the Black Power March, I just need to ask you one thing because we're going to run out of time. But I do want to ask you about the impact of Malcolm, of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Omar Wally Malcolm X. Malcolm had come to Selma and spoke there in Brown Chapel Church, I think February 4th. This was, during the time you all were organizing in Selma. This was before Bloody Sunday, obviously. And then a few weeks later, he was killed, assassinated in the Audubon Ballroom in New York. Could you, as you all are going through all of this, in the teeth of the violence of the white supremacy dynamic, can you talk about the impact that Malcolm was having, on, you can just talk about yourself or, Snick, Stokely, Cleve or whatever. I mean, can you just talk about the impact that Malcolm was having as you all were going through, this phase of the struggle?
Malcolm at that point wasn't having basically a little impact. Malcolm was struggling with inside his organization, and Malcolm began to stretch out and go to Africa and go to Kwame Nkrumah, go to Sekou Touré, go to Egypt and make these kind of connections. And Malcolm's speeches began to talk about Lumumba and whatever. But Malcolm, after death, after they killed Malcolm, that's when Malcolm becomes strong and began to speak from the grave, and then Snick and many other groups around the country began to turn to the philosophy and be educated by Malcolm X, and Malcolm become the most dominant personality inside the movement. Now, Malcolm was always more educated than most people in the movement, especially Dr. King, because Dr. King came to the movement. He was just drafted one day and found himself in a movement, and he had to learn from demonstration, protests, and whatever. And Dr. King built thousands and millions of people to respect him for it. But Malcolm was in jail, and he stayed in jail, I think, 11 years or whatever. But he read and studied and became a very international educated man. Malcolm knew what a revolution was. So when Malcolm would talk, Malcolm would be more knowledgeable than probably anybody that would talk. And then Malcolm, after when they killed Malcolm, we was in battle in Moultrie. We was in battle all over. Snick had people fighting in at least 200 different places at the same time on any given day, or probably every day, in different areas. So when Malcolm got killed, we were in battle, and when they killed Malcolm X, now groups of people started getting tapes on Malcolm X and getting his tapes and began to make copies of it and pass them around. And back in them days, everybody was smoking a little herb. People started smoking their herb, and when they smoked herb, people put little tapes of Malcolm in, and Malcolm started preaching and started the educational process. I guess our mind began to go to war in terms of getting knowledge and developed the ideology. A little brother was talking about a minute ago. Our ideology began to lean toward Africa, lean toward revolution. We began to look at Lumumba in the Congo. We began to look at Africa. Malcolm said revolutions are fought over land. We began to look at land. We began to look at Mao Zedong. And we began to look at the international movement and the international struggle. And when Malcolm pointed all that out to us, now these forces become dominant. And when we look toward Africa, we saw revolution in South Africa and slavery and apartheid and whatever, and imperialism in South Africa. We saw revolution, Frelimo, in Mozambique. We saw Augusto Neto in Angola. The brothers down in Guinea-Bissau, revolution, Zimbabwe, and what have you. And other areas in Africa was fighting for their independence and freedom, and that Kwame Nkrumah had already influenced Martin King back in 1957 when Dr. King, or 58, 57, when Dr. King went to Africa for the independence. Dr. King met all the different African freedom fighters from all over the world and had a meeting with them. Nkrumah put them together, and we met with Mugabe and all these different guys. They all talked about how they were using guerrilla warfare, shooting the planes down, Mouse cutting the heads of the colonial officers. Dr. King talked about his nonviolence and how he was using. They thought Martin King was crazy. Martin King thought they was sort of off a little bit too. But when Martin King came back to Montgomery, he started telling people if they can do it in Ghana, we can do it in Montgomery, and what have you. So Nkrumah did influence Dr. King early on. And then later, Kwame Ture turned to Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, and began to talk about Pan-Africanism, and began to talk that we can never be free until Africa's free, and began to let people know that we are Africans, and Africa's our land. We began to tell people about Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Zimbabwe, and 1,000 different empires and languages, and we had our own gods before Jesus and before Islam. We had Yoruba and Shango and Olu and Ogun and all the different African gods. We built pyramids. We the ones started mathematics, science, chemistry, engineering, biochemistry, nuclear physics, law, philosophy, music, melting, and we began to give our people another vision. And one of the assignments that I had was to let everybody in that I run across know that we were Africans, and we built African movements. I helped build an organization called SABU, Student Organization for Black Unity. We built schools to teach our people about Africa, like the Pan-African Work Center, Malcolm X Liberation University, and we did that. We built newspaper, The African World, and all our articles about liberation movements and Guinea-Bissau, and how we was fighting, shooting their planes down, fighting against Portuguese imperialism, how we fought in Angola, Portuguese imperialism, Mozambique, how we was fighting against British imperialism in Zimbabwe, and how Zimbabwe was a great kingdom, and how Zimbabwe, how the British came there, killed 60 million people, named the country after a white man named Rhodesia, Cecil Rhodes, and he left a will to educate little white children, and all these white folks that went to school on blood money, including Clinton and all of them went to school on African blood money because they couldn't be nothing but racist, and they know they were going on blood money. And how the Congo is the richest place in the world, full of diamonds, gold, oil, coltan, and many other resources. And there was a great warrior there named Lumumba who tried to unite the Congo and unite Africa, and the United Nations and the CIA and the imperialists went there and killed Lumumba. But Lumumba became our God and our shining light, and we used Lumumba to tell people about Africa and tell people that Africa is our land and we must fight for Africa. And we condemn the United Nations, we condemn the United States for killing Lumumba, that they later killed Malcolm, they later killed Martin King, they later killed Amilcar Cabral, and thousands of other people that tried to show us our freedom and liberation. Even lately in Mali, they killed Muammar Gaddafi, which was our beloved shining light that was trying to unite Africa, like Kwame Nkrumah said, trying to build an African bank, trying to put African money together, and trying to build a United States of Africa, and trying to end all these weak African leaders that they have created that stand back and watch them kill Gaddafi, stand back and help them take the diamonds, the gold, the oil, the silver, and the copper. And we have African leaders today, neo-colonial leaders are weak, that they help the imperialists take the diamonds, take the gold, take the silver, take the copper, take the pearl, and take it out of Africa. And many of them even pull guns on, most of them got guns on their own people, telling us to be cool, where the trucks and the ships and the airplanes roll into Africa and take our diamonds and gold out. And many of them even assassinate those of us who speak up and talk about this freedom. So we are in war. Matter of fact, I just talked to some of Amilcar Cabral's men today, the PAIGC, and they call and tell me that the president, who's Uncle Tom, they cut all the people's lights off because they're trying to unite over there. They cut their lights off. They trying to beat up the freedom fighters over there and whatever. One brother over there said because he a freedom fighter, they took his little job from him and whatever. And I had just rushed out there and sent him $100 just yesterday. And the freedom fighters, and it's many of them, and I'm just worried about, I hope they don't kill them, because these people assassinate people and do these kinds of things. We in war. All I'm saying, we'll never be free until Africa's free.
Exactly. And of course, we wanted to, establish that link between civil rights and African liberation. And of course, it goes through Black Power, but we're running short on time. But you have not, and I know you're not into this. You don't care about getting credit for whatever. But I do think it's important for people to know that the link between civil rights and Pan-Africanism and liberation, it goes through Black Power, because we had to get to Black Power. And I just want to read something that, since you mentioned James Foreman, I have his book here, The Making of Black Revolutionaries. And I'm going to read this, and I'll let you make your final comments. Okay, so this is in chapter 55. It's titled Black Power Strikes. I'm going to read it. It says, "Hey, Jim, I got an idea. I want to know what you think of it." It was Willie Ricks, the young SNCC field secretary who had acquired a reputation as a brilliant organizer of young people in Birmingham, Americas, and other hot spots in the South. He had stopped in the Atlanta office on the way to Mississippi. The Meredith March in June of 1966 was underway, and Stokely Carmichael had asked Ricks to come over. "Suppose when I get over there to Mississippi and I'm speaking, I start hollering for Black Power. What do you think of that?" Ricks asked. "Would you back me up? You think it would scare people in SNCC? Black Power? Sure, try it." I told him, this is Foreman speaking, "Why not? After all, you'd be shortening the phrase that we've always been using, power for poor people, power for black people. Black Power is shorter, and it means the same thing. Go on and try it." And that is how the cry Black Power came to be voiced. Willie Ricks, whom the world has barely noticed so far, must rank as one of those unknown heroes who captured the mood of history. In calling for Black Power, he caught the essence of the spirit moving black people in the United States and around the world who were poor, black, and without power. So that's your brother, our ancestor now, Brother Foreman, explaining to people how the whole phrase, the whole idea of Black Power came about. The idea in SNCC came from you, and then it was articulated, of course, by Kwame Ture and Rap and others. So you deserve that credit, brother. I know that you operate with zero ego, and you don't want people to give you credit and whatnot, but you have to be given credit for that, because Black Power is the link from civil rights to Pan-Africanism. We had to go through Black Power to get there. This whole idea of being independent and self-reliant and self-determining. Nobody was in the struggle because they wanted to, sit on toilets next to white people or sit in schools with white people. It was a struggle for power all along, really, to be self-determining. So can you just give us your closing words? And we really appreciate you having on our program today.
Well, first, I'm really great, honored to always be in your presence. You've always been a great, great, great warrior. And you and the young brothers that's on the program today, I forgot the two names there. But thank y'all, too. And thank you for having me on your program. But on your last point, I would like to say that civil rights and Black Power ain't nothing but African power. Ain't nothing but saying we want our land, our country, have our own resources, have our own government, and we build a communist, socialist government that's for our people and give everybody education, medicine, food, clothes, shelter, and make all our people all over the world, protect them, and build us a worldwide army, get us a nuclear bomb like the little brother in North Korea. He was a nice little guy. Get us a nuclear bomb like him and defend Africa and keep these monsters off. And, if you got a house full of roaches, you got to get some roach poison. So we need to get us a nuclear bomb to keep the imperialists out of Africa and defend ourselves and be able to defend ourselves. And we got to be strong and we got to be warriors. And the United States, as Dr. King says, is the greatest perpetrator of violence in the world, the greatest terrorist nation in the world. And Du Bois said that we would never find freedom and liberation until the United States and Europe is totally destroyed. And I agree 100%. And I believe that Kwame Nkrumah said that Pan-Africanism or civil rights or black power is Pan-Africanism, and Pan-Africanism means the total liberation and unification of Africa. We got to have a United States of Africa, unite Africa into one powerful army, one powerful country, one powerful nation, one power economic order, socialist economic order, and then we can be free. We got to do like the Chinese, get our own country, our own land, where we can have African power. There's Chinese power. They got it because they got China. All freedom, all revolutions are based on land, and Africa is our land, and we want to unite with our African brothers in the Caribbean and the West Indies, and our African brothers in South and Central America, and our native brothers like Hugo Chavez, Fidel Castro, the Cuban Revolution, the Coconut Revolution out there in the South Pacific, and Thomas Takari, and all the different freedom fighters, whether they in their graves or not, Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong. We want to unite and come together and smash and destroy the evils of capitalism and imperialism, because they're the enemies of the world and they're causing all the problems. But from all of that, we've had great brothers like you, Face Bradley, to grow out of it. And I want you to keep telling the truth and keep making a way that we can tell who we are, what we want, and how we're going to get it. So, Fitz Bradley, thank you so much, and thank your radio station, Afrikan Liberation Radio, for having me on here today. I really appreciate it, and thank all the people that will hear my voice anywhere. Thank you so much, and I'm very humble to serve you, and I only apologize that I haven't served you more and better and better and better, but hopefully I do better and serve you and serve our people. But where we're talking, so many thousands of our people have died today just while we're on the radio. So many have been in prison, so many bombs have fell on our people because of the crimes of the United States and Europe and imperialism. But thank you, Africans. Appreciate you.
Okay. Asante Sana, Baba Mukasa, we certainly appreciate it. All right, brother. All right, Black Power, African Power.
Thank you, brother.
Long live Africa, and Africanism is the only way.
Hotel.
Power or the lack of power. I want to repeat this. Power or the lack of power. If your education in this institution is not about gaining real power, not jobs, because your jobs do not represent power. Not getting elected, that does not represent power either. Buying your houses and fine clothes does not represent power. If it is not about real power, you are being miseducated and misled, and you will die educated and misled. If your study of Black history is merely an exercise in feeling good about yourself, then you will die feeling good. The study of history then must be more than the pumping up of your self-esteem and the pumping up of your pride. Those things are important, but ultimately, those things are not the means by which we will save ourselves as people in this world.